Hi class, tonight we're going to talk about building strong claims. This is my second attempt at this video this evening because I did not realize that I was also recording the audio from Run the Jewels 4 in the background of my computer. So because you could not hear me over Killer Mike and LP, I am taking another stab at this video. So we're going to talk about what it means to build strong claims and how they work in academic scholarship. So what does it mean to pose a claim, right? So a claim is just a statement that we can debate, right? It is not really a statement of fact usually, unless that fact is in dispute. But in theory, for a research project, we ask a question, right? And it doesn't really matter what field of study you're in. Each field has sort of a set of questions that's most appropriate to it. And then we try to provide an answer to that question, and that answer is our claim. So, for example, if we were trying to understand since COVID-19 has been, such a defining characteristic of this past year, if researchers were looking at, what is the best course of treatment for this disease, that's their research question. And if they were to publish a scientific journal article, right, their claim would be their answer to that question. In this paper, we're going to argue that the most effective treatment is X, Y, and Z, right? So a claim is essentially the answer you are trying to provide to a research question. So what's our question? Well, what are the genres in the genre set of the college application or admissions process, and how do they shape the production of a specific genre in that set, the college admissions essay? And let's break that down a little bit. So a genre is just a type of text that we can recognize by having common features, purposes, audiences. If you think about the wedding invitation, right? A wedding invitation, you probably haven't received a whole lot of these at your age, but you will when you're older. If you were to tell me that you had received a wedding invitation in the mail, I would probably be able to tell you an awful lot about what that looked like, even without opening up. And although it might appear that I am psychic, it's simply that I have, in the process of having to put, those invitations together for my own wedding. And when I say I put them together, I'm being generous. My wife really was the one who made sure that they were, good. And having received lots of them, as my friends from Fairfield have aged and gotten married over the past 10 years, you see enough of these, you begin to recognize the patterns. So if we think about the college application process, you encounter lots of different kinds of texts that we could categorize into genres based on their features or purposes or audiences, and the things they have in common. So, we're thinking about those genres, and we're thinking about them in the context of a genre set, which is just a collection of genres that go together in a particular kind of situation. So in the textbook, they talk about different genres that are involved in, scholarly writing. So, for example, you might read an advertisement for grant funding, right? So, there's a call for scholarship around the topic, and there's grant funding. So you read that, you write a grant proposal, which is a different genre. You get feedback from a reviewer, which might be a third genre. Eventually you conduct the research, and then you write that into a conference paper. That's another genre. And then you write that into an article that might get published. That's another genre. And these are all connected in a lot of different ways. So with the process of college applications, we're going to be thinking about what genres make up the genre set around that particular process. And then, how do all of those genres, or at least some of the more important ones, shape the production of a specific genre in that set, which is the college admissions essay, which we recognize as a very important document in that process. So what's our claim going to look like? Well, it's going to be sort of a two-part claim because we really have two questions, right? So what are the genres in the genre set? Well, you're going to make a claim about what genres belong in that genre set. And how do they shape the college admissions essay? Well, that's your second claim, right? So, okay, once I've argued that these are the genres we should pay attention to and why, I'm now going to argue how they impact the production of the college admissions essay. And in this case, you'll do that by looking at your own examples as a case study. So when we're trying to make a strong claim, we can think of it in a couple of ways, but I'm turning here to Chapter 7 in the Craft of Research 4th edition, which is a text that's actually available for free through the university library. And I'll probably post a link to it on our Blackboard page. It's a really great resource. We're not going to be using it really directly this semester. At least I don't think we're going to, but it's worth checking out. It's really valuable at any stage of your academic career. And in that book, the authors outlined 5 parts of an argument, right? So claims, reasons, evidence, acknowledgments/responses, and warrants. And so strong claims, particularly, at the beginning of a piece, right, incorporate 3 of these parts into a thesis statement. And those are claims, reasons, and acknowledgments or responses. And we'll get into evidence and warrants in another video, but for now we'll stick with these 3. So what does the claim do? Well, it establishes what you're arguing. So let's just take an example, right? College education should be heavily subsidized by state and federal taxes. This is a statement that could be debated, hence it is a claim. So if that's a claim, what are reasons and what do they do? Well, they explain why you're making your argument. So here's some reasons, right? Because the economic value of eliminating debt outweighs the economic burden of higher taxes. Now, some of the more astute watchers right now might say, well, Dr. DiBiase, isn't that just another claim? And you would be correct. A reason is really just a smaller claim that helps establish a larger one. And so you have your broader claim, and then you have a series of smaller claims that help you build the foundation for what you're trying to argue. So what are acknowledgments? Well, they kind of help us establish why our claim matters. So they can do this in a couple of ways. The 2 most common are these. So one is to simply acknowledge research that has previously existed, and then point out that there is something missing that you're going to try and address, right? So you might say, although writing studies scholars have spent a lot of time thinking about genres and genre sets, one particular genre set that hasn't received a lot of attention is the college admissions process. See, so you've acknowledged something that exists, and you've acknowledged what's missing, and that helps establish why your claim is going to matter. And it's going to matter because it fills in a gap in our knowledge. Another approach, right, is to acknowledge competing points of views, right, which I've done in this particular example. Although some economists fear that free tuition models of college education are unsustainable, college education should be more heavily subsidized, blah, 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 blah. And in this case, instead of acknowledging prior research, I'm acknowledging the existence of dissenting voices in the broader conversation around this issue. Both of these approaches, right, acknowledging the broader field of study and what it's done and what it has not yet done, or acknowledging an already existing position and then trying to offer an alternative to that, are ways of helping the audience understand why your claim matters. It matters because it's either going to help advance our knowledge in a way that we haven't done yet, and or it's going to correct, it's too strong of a word, but it's going to offer an alternative to an existing way of thinking that is probably of value for our field to consider. And we're not getting there just yet, but when we get to, you'll see this actually really clearly at the beginning of week 3 in Deborah Brandt's essay on sponsors of literacy. She lays out an argument that begins by saying, here is what as a field we have studied about literacy. Here is how we have not yet approached the question. I'm going to look at it that way, and here's why that matters. So that's a good model to kind of look at if you want to jump ahead a little bit. Now, I hate to use the term formula, but genres typically have, certain conventions, and one common convention is, as I've already put it, although people think X, I'm going to argue Y because of Z, right? So I'm going to acknowledge one thing, I'm going to make a claim that sort of runs counter to that, and here are the reasons for doing so. Alternatively, right, it would be something like, although our field has studied X, we haven't really looked at Y. I'm going to look at Y and make an argument, and then outline what that argument is going to be. So what kinds of claims can we make? Well, there are a couple different types. This is just one way of thinking about it. So we've got claims of fact, claims of definition, claims of cause and consequence, and claims of evaluation. So fact, right? I'm proving that something is what I say it is. This is sort of like, you'll see this maybe in the hard sciences, right? Trying to prove that a particular fossil belongs to a particular kind of organism, right? So we found this dinosaur bone, and I'm going to argue that it is in fact from a Stegosaurus, right? Or a chemist arguing about the way that some sort of chemical interaction occurs. I'm going to argue that this interaction occurs in this particular way, and they're making an argument about the fact of something. We do not do that so much in writing studies, right? The stuff that we're looking at isn't really a question of fact in that particular kind of way. We have arguments of definition, right? I'm making an argument about how something should be categorized or recategorized. Now, that is something you will definitely be doing in this project, right? The process of identifying a genre is really a process of definition. I have this sort of collection of texts, pieces of writing, and I'm going to argue that they belong together as a category of text, right? So, for example, I talked in one of the documents about I would consider a college tour to be a genre. Well, I don't know if most people would think about a college tour as being a genre, but I would try to make that argument by showing commonalities in the way that college tours are usually performed, their common sense of audience, their common sense of purpose, common set of features. We're also trying to define a genre set, right? So you're going to try and say, okay, now that I've identified these different genres, they count as a genre set, and here's why I think they should be categorized as a set. We also have claims of cause and consequence, right? I am making an argument about the effect of some variable on some phenomena. Well, you're going to be making that argument here too. So you're going to be arguing, right, in certainly the second part of your analysis section, how you think certain genres impact how we end up making the college admissions essay, or how we end up producing the college admissions essay. And so this is a cause and consequence argument, right? I'm going to make a claim that this particular genre impacts this other particular genre in this particular way, and here's how I'm going to show you that. And then finally, we have arguments of evaluation. So this is kind of an interesting type of argument, and it's not one that I'm going to ask you to make in this paper, and I'll explain it for a moment why. When you are proposing a research study, you have to talk through how you're going to conduct that study, right? What is your process for assessing your data, right? And it is reasonable for an outside observer to call into question whether or not your approach to assessing your data made sense, right? Well, if this is what you're trying to study, why would you go about studying it in this particular way? So frequently in methods sections, part of that would involve sort of a justification for why that methodology makes sense given the research question being asked. I am not asking you to do this because I provide you with the methodology. So although in theory you would want to kind of unpack why this makes sense, because I'm part of the audience here and I'm sort of aware of what you're doing, I'm not going to ask you to do that at this particular moment. But it is something that you want to think about, right? Why do we approach answering certain questions in certain ways? And this is actually something that you'll learn more about as you make your way through your various majors, right? Different academic disciplines favor certain kinds of assessment methods or methodologies for their data, and so that's something that you should be aware of, though you're not going to be doing a lot of that in this particular paper. So I'm going to wrap up here. One thing to think about, and we'll come back to this in a video later this week about evidence and warrants, is that the kind of claim that you are making will impact the kinds of evidence that you provide in order to demonstrate that claim. So we'll come back to that in another video later this week. That'll probably get posted for Wednesday, and you can be thinking about that as well. And that can hopefully guide your thinking as you're making your way through the writing process and thinking through possible revisions that you're going to be making. So hope everyone's doing well. Take care.